3 bone-chilling true mountain horrors. You won't believe what haunts the wilderness at midnight. The moon hung high, casting sharp shadows against the jagged peaks. It was a night like no other, perfect for the unspeakable to unfold. The eerie howl of the wind seemed almost human, whispering secrets that chilled the bone. The mountains were alive, pulsing with a dark energy. Legends told tales of 3 horrors that lurked within those towering giants, waiting for the midnight hour to claim their next victim. In the dense woods, where trees twisted like gnarled fingers, hikers often spoke of the whispering shadow. Those unfortunate enough to encounter it described a darkness that enveloped them, a weight they couldn't shake, like a shroud of despair. Every late-night camper could feel it, the prickling sensation of eyes boring into their very souls. It was said that those who heard the whispers succumbed to madness, never to be seen again. Just the thought tightened the chest, sending a shiver racing down the spine. Then there was the screaming wind, that dreadful, piercing noise that cut through the night, slicing through flesh and bone, echoing through barren valleys. Folks claimed it was the sound of lost souls crying out for help. Just when you thought it was the wind, it would pull at your sanity, leaving you too terrified to sleep, eyes wide, heart racing. And don't forget the ghost of the bloodied climber. A tale that rolled off the tongues of the brave and foolish alike. A climber had gone missing decades ago, after a fatal fall. Locals swore they could hear him calling for aid each night, his voice growing fainter with every passing year, yet each plea still weighed upon their hearts as if they were climbing alongside him. Peering into the darkness, knowing he was lost to the wilderness, brought a lump to the throat that wouldn't budge. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. But the night was just starting, and the air crackled with anticipation. As someone dared to tread deeper into the woods, a figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette with no clear form, neither man nor beast. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the whispers grew louder, twisting the air into a suffocating clench. Time froze, heartbeats echoed like thunder, and a foreboding realization washed over them. Would they succumb to the allure of the mountain horrors before dawn? The burning question lingered as the first tendrils of darkness wrapped around them, leaving only uncertainty in its wake. The figure loomed closer, the darkness clinging to it like a wet blanket. Each step echoed ominously against the tree trunks, a sound that sent waves of panic crashing through the heart of anyone unlucky enough to witness it. The whispers intensified, curling in and out like tendrils of smoke, filling the air with dread. The very forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Suddenly, a branch snapped just behind them, sharp against the silence. Panic surged. Someone's instincts kicked in, a primal urge to run, but the thick underbrush felt more like a prison, trapping every footstep. The silhouette flickered, splitting the shadows, revealing a glimpse of eyes that burned like coals in the dark. "Run!" a voice gasped, barely cutting through the cacophony of whispers. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was a lifeline. With adrenaline suffusing every muscle, they turned to flee. The path ahead felt unfamiliar, twisted by fear. The trees around them swayed, almost alive, seeming to reach out as if to snatch them back into the depths of the darkness. The wind picked up, carrying a chilling howl that pressed against their ears. It howled and shrieked, echoing their frantic thoughts. The screaming wind was not a myth tonight, it was a terrifying reality that clawed at their sanity. "Don't look back!" someone yelled, breathless, but the urge was irresistible. With each hurried step, the figure seemed to grow distorted, sometimes looming larger, sometimes receding into the abyss. Shadows danced ominously. But something else was emerging, another sound, a frantic whisper that cut through the roaring wind. "Help me!" The voice was hollow and sorrowful, laced with desperation. Shadows twisted and recoiled as the words lured them deeper into the forest. The unmistakable plea from the ghost of the bloodied climber wrapped around them like a shroud, tugging at their pity, threatening to ensnare their resolve. "Stop!" someone shouted, but the impulse to assist the voice echoed in their minds. Each echo twisted into another whisper, "Help me!" They felt themselves slowing, feet unwilling to move. The branches overhead closed in tighter, blocking the dim moonlight and plunging them into suffocating darkness. Then, above the whispers and the howling wind, there came a piercing scream. It chilled to the bone, freezing them in place. The scream of someone in the throes of terror, a life caught between the living and the lost. In a moment suspended in terror, no one moved. The air hung thick with apprehension, pregnant with the foreboding sense that something horrific was approaching. The ground trembled once more, but this time, it was more than just an echo of their racing hearts. A deep rumble cascaded through the forest, shaking branches loose and sending animals scurrying in panic. It was a warning. The mountain itself protested against whatever approached that eye, and that instant, the shadows shifted, coiling around them like living tendrils. The chilling realization pierced through the numbness: they were not alone. Not just the darkness or the wind. Something else, something far more sinister had awakened. As the trees parted to reveal the figure now fully formed, a scream tore from their throats. What stood before them defied belief, a monstrous entity, born of nightmares. Breathing heavily, they turned to flee, but the path was gone. The forest twisted, snarling at their every attempt to escape. With fear surging through their veins, they ran deeper into the woods, hearts pounding, desperate for dawn, yet knowing the horrors of the mountains had only just begun to reveal themselves. What would happen next? Would they confront the source of their fears, or become yet another tale of the mountains? The answer lurked in the shadows, waiting to unfold. Their frantic breaths fogged in the cold night air, a mix of desperation and fear clouding their minds. The monstrous figure loomed larger, its shadow encompassing them, overwhelming their senses. Heart pounding, Jess led the group, tugging at the hands of others, knowing they had to find a way out before the night consumed them whole. "Keep moving," she urged, though doubt threatened to choke her words. Each echo of their footsteps blended into the oppressive whispers as if the forest conspired against them. Realizing they were heading straight for a clearing, she shouted, "We need to stick together. We can't let it separate us." Suddenly, a sharp pang of fear gripped her gut as she noticed the darkness shifting around them, swirling like a living entity. The air grew heavier, thick with malice, and she couldn't shake the sense that something was watching from the shadows. Glancing back, she caught a glimpse of the figure again. Its eyes burned fiercely, igniting the darkness around them. A low growl reverberated through the air, chilling her to the bone. Behind them, voices rose, panicked murmurs rising to a fevered pitch. "My phone. I can't find my phone." A young man named Tyler was stumbling backward. Jess felt a surge of panic. They needed light, needed to see where they were going, but everything felt so hopeless. "Forget the phone. Run!" she shouted, but the sound was lost amidst the howling wind that whipped through the trees like an angry spirit, drowning out their cries. As they stumbled out into the clearing, Jess hoped for a moment of safety. The moon hung low, shrouded behind clouds, casting eerie shadows that kept shifting like restless spirits. They gathered in a circle, breaths coming in ragged gasps. "What the hell was that?" Tyler gasped, eyes wide with horror. The group echoed his fears, uncertainty gnawing at their insides. "I don't know," Jess said, feeling as lost as the rest. "But it's not gone. It's still here." The whispers returned, sharper now. "Help me, the blood," the ghostly cries intertwined with the chilling laughter of the entity, mocking their fear, igniting a frantic need to flee. "What do we do?" someone asked, trembling. "Follow me. We have to get back to the trail," Jess commanded, each word trembling under the weight of a bitter realization. Every instinct screamed that the figure hunted them like prey, and the forest had become a labyrinth designed to trap them. But as they moved, the path stretched before them like a taunting mirage. No familiar markers, no sign of comfort. Just darkness ahead, bending and warping under the weight of forgotten souls. The trees leaned in, suffocatingly close, their branches curling like skeletal hands reaching for the weak. Then, another scream filled the night, raw and unbearable. It came from deeper within the woods, a sound of pure agony that seized Jess's heart with icy fingers. That was Sam. Someone cried. Sam! Jess shouted, but there was no response but the sinister echo of the forest swallowing it whole. She felt a pang of regret, wondering if they had been stupid to run instead of trying to find help. But she had seen the figure. She had seen those eyes. Suddenly, the earth trembled again, and from the corner of her eye, she saw shadows undulating, shifting with malicious intent. Torn between fear and the desperate need to save Sam, Jess hesitated. Each heartbeat screamed urgency, the air crackled with a tension that promised doom. "We can't stay here," she yelled, catching the terrified gazes of the others. As they turned to run back into the trees, Jess glimpsed a figure emerging from the shadows behind them, not the monster but something worse, a familiar face wearing despair and dread. "Help me," the voice rasped, and recognition burned in the pit of her stomach. It was Sam, but something was wrong, something was terribly wrong. Could they trust what their eyes showed them? Or was this another trick of the forest, a cruel game by dark forces determined to pull them under? As they teetered on the brink of ruin, Jess made a decision that would change everything. What awaited them in the shadows was more than just a ghost, it was the truth itself, masked in horror. Would they face it before it consumed them all? "Jess! What are you doing?" Tyler's voice broke through the noise of the forest, snapping her back to reality. The sight of Sam, his ashen face and hollow eyes, made Jess's skin crawl. Fear and uncertainty coiled in her stomach, tightening with every passing second. "Sam, is that really you?" Jess forced the words out, but they felt heavy on her tongue. Struggling to mask her doubt, she took a hesitant step forward. The moment felt suspended, like the air itself was holding its breath. "Please help me." Sam's voice slithered through the darkness, sounding both familiar and alien. The group exchanged frantic glances. Jess could sense the panic radiating from them, overwhelming the stillness of the night. They were trapped, not just by the woods, but by the haunting specter of what they once knew to be Sam. "Don't go near him. It could be a trap," Tyler warned, his eyes darting around as though the shadows themselves were alive. "Remember, whatever that thing was, it could be playing with us. We can't just leave him." Jess snapped, every nerve in her body urging her to move toward her friend. But deep down, she was aware of the warning tingling in her bones. This was no ordinary rescue. The whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind. "Help me!" The blood they mingled with the chill of the night air, seeping into her thoughts. She closed her eyes tight, willing it all away, but it was too late. She felt the darkness tightening its grip around them. "If we go closer, we risk everything," whispered a girl named Claire, her voice tremulous. "We don't know what's waiting for us." The thought echoed in Jess's mind. Did they turn and run, leaving Sam to whatever fate awaited him? But what if the forest had twisted Sam's voice, just as it had warped the woods around them? Sam's voice broke again, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "You can't leave me." I don't know how. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, reflecting the shadows that loomed behind him. "Stop!" Jess shouted, desperate to snap them back to reason. "We need to think this through." Every instinct screamed to save him, yet her legs felt like lead. The air around them thickened, dense with a palpable fear that threatened to suffocate her. Without warning, the earth trembled once more. A deep growl echoed through the trees, sending vibrations through their bones. In a frenzied panic, Jess spun around to face the direction of the creature, its silhouette growing clearer, its figure unfurling in the absence of the moonlight. The monster had returned. "We have to go," Tyler urged, gripping Jess's arm. But even as she fought against the terror, she couldn't bring herself to abandon Sam. "Please, Jess, help me." The plea dripped from Sam's lips, layered with something sinister. It was sweeter, almost intoxicating, but Jess knew better. Run! Jess screamed, shoving Tyler forward as the creature emerged from the shadows, eyes flaring with malevolence. Without hesitation, Jess glanced back at Sam one last time. He stood frozen, a puppet torn between strings of despair and denial. Sam! She cried, but the sound shattered in the air like glass, and in that instant between realizing what they were abandoning and the beast descending upon them she felt everything shift. Jess! Tyler yanked her abruptly, dragging her back into motion. They sprinted down the darkened path, the echo of Sam's cries clawing at her heart. But shadows stretched out and reached for them from every corner. With every breath, Jess felt an icy finger trailing closely behind, whispering lies that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. In the distance, another howl pierced the night, a bone-chilling sound of a soul caught between two worlds. They stumbled further into the darkness, desperation pushing them onward. Where do we go? Claire shouted, panic rising within her. The trees whispered their secrets, hiding the way, twisting their very existence. We have to find the trail. Jess urged, but doubts began to creep in. Would they even find it? Or had they crossed into a realm where paths no longer existed? A sudden flash of light illuminated the woods, but it was more than just the moon finally breaking through the clouds. It was a flicker of something far worse. It beckoned them toward what lay ahead. Friend or foe was shrouded in the darkest shadow, waiting to claim its next victim. Would they dare to venture further, or would they be consumed by the very darkness born of their worst fears? The path ahead twisted ominously, leaving only one terrifying question lingering in the cold night air. They ran blindly, propelled by panic, deeper into the thick forest. Jess could hardly keep her breath steady. Every inhalation felt like a weight pressing harder against her chest. The shadows morphed into grotesque shapes, dancing at the edge of her vision, taunting her with the reflection of her paralyzing fear. Over here! Claire yelled, suddenly veering left, and the others instinctively followed. The ground was uneven, roots snagging at their feet like fingers trying to pull them down. Wait! Are we heading towards the scream? Tyler barked, alarmed. He reached out as Jess stumbled, catching her just in time. Just keep running. Jess gasped. We can't stop. But as they dashed further, the metallic scent of blood filled the air, sharp and urgent. Jess's heart raced in sync with the rhythmic pounding of her feet against the earth. The screams reverberated in her head, bouncing around her mind like a trapped animal. Jess! Tyler's grip on her arm tightened. We need to find somewhere safe. His eyes darted around, wild with fear, the desperation spiking in his voice. What if there is no safe place? Jess shot back, bitterness creeping into her tone. What if we're just running into its waiting arms? The moment hung heavy, a chilling realization racing through them. They blinked, taking in the dread surrounding them. 1,000 branches creaked, and the chuckling wind felt alive, filled with contempt and wicked mirth. We have to stick together. Claire urged, but her voice wavered. The night felt suffocating, every step a gamble against the ominous whispers that rippled through the trees. A sudden rustle sent them spiraling into silence. They stood frozen, listening. Jess could hear her heart pounding like a war drum, drowning out even the strangest howl that echoed dismally from the darkness. Did you hear that? Tyler whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. Suddenly, like a spark igniting a dry field, the light burst forth again, illuminating the shape that stood within the trees. Jess flinched, instinctively inching closer to Tyler. It's a campfire. Claire shouted, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes, but as they hurried toward the light, Jess felt a warning pulse in her veins. Something about that brightness felt wrong, like a siren's call. Shadows twisted around the fire, forming a ghastly silhouette that wasn't human. Chills cascaded over her body, a primal urge to flee clawing at her insides, almost in slow motion. As they approached the flickering beacon, a figure emerged from the darkness on the other side of the fire. Jess felt her throat tightening like a vice, as she caught sight of the creature that was watching them with eyes wide too wide. Run! Tyler roared again, the urgency slicing through Jess's frozen fear, they turned without hesitation, the warmth of the fire no longer comforting, but terrifying. As they plunged back into the abyss of trees, the air vibrated with the guttural roar of the beast, the sound ripping through the silence like thunder, echoing their pounding hearts. Jess. Claire. We can't keep running blindly. Tyler shouted, desperation twisting his face as they raced side by side. We need to make a plan. Who cares about a plan? Jess screamed back, adrenaline surging. We need to survive. But the woods grew denser, the shadows thicker, and behind them, the growl morphed into a growling chuckle, whispering taunts that echoed in the dark. Just as Jess caught up with Claire, they stumbled into a clearing. Her stomach dropped as she gasped. A grotesque tree loomed at the center, its bark black, twisted, and oozing. And beneath its roots, something squirmed, the remnants of what once could have been. The blood, Claire mumbled, horrified as she slowly pointed downward. The ground pulsated, soaking every nerve in dread, warning them of the darkness lurking just below the surface. Jess felt her mind racing, spinning in confusion. What had they stumbled into? Stay away from it. Tyler yelled, pulling Claire back. But it was too late. From the darkness behind them, an onslaught of shadows surged, rushing toward the clearing. The weight of despair crashed down, and Jess's world constricted as dread clawed at her throat, choked by panic. In here. Jess threw herself toward the roots of the tree, hoping for some kind of refuge, and as they dove in together, breaths mingling with uncertainty, Jess caught a glimpse of something shimmering within the darkness. A haunting reflection, pulling her deeper into a world unfathomable. Would they escape this twisted snare, or would they succumb to the very horrors they feared the most? The roots writhed, teasing the edges of despair that beckoned them closer to a truth they were not prepared to face. Beneath the wicked branches, another voice joined in the chaos, one that sounded eerily like Sam. Something sinister flickered in the shadows. Did it mean salvation, or was it the final trap leading them to their doom? They huddled together beneath the twisted roots, their breaths shallow and ragged, terrified of what lay outside. The darkness felt alive, breathing and waiting for them. Jess pressed her back against the cold, damp bark, her heart pounding in her chest as she strained to hear the sounds of the approaching shadows. Is it gone? Claire's voice cracked. She clutched Tyler's arm tightly, eyes wide, reflecting both fear and a desperate spark of hope. I don't know, Tyler whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of their pounding hearts. Stay quiet. We can't let it hear us. Minutes felt like hours as the growling chuckle faded, replaced by an eerie silence that made Jess's skin crawl. Each breath that escaped their mouths felt like it could betray them. Just when she thought they might have a moment of respite, a low, raspy whisper echoed from the shadows enveloping them. Help me. The sound was almost human, but twisted and strained. It sent icy fingers crawling up Jess's spine. She exchanged a terrified glance with Claire, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. Is that Sam? Claire shivered, the name spilling from her lips like a silent prayer. He might be close. I don't think it's him, Tyler replied urgently, tension rippling in his voice. We can't trust anything out here. It could be a trap. The disembodied whisper continued, winding around them like a fog, its tone desperate, pleading. Please help me. Jess found herself drawn to the voice despite Tyler's warnings. What if he's hurt? She whispered back, her mind racing. We can't just leave him. But before Tyler could respond, the ground under them shuddered, a deep rumble emanating from the tree's roots. Claire's scream tore through the night as the grotesque tree throbbed, lines of dark sap oozing violently from the cracks. Jess! We need to get out. Tyler grabbed her wrist, pulling her back as the very earth seemed to awaken, shifting beneath them. With a sudden, horrifying crack, the roots began to part, revealing a gaping maw of darkness below. The agonized cries of whoever was trapped there escalated, clawing at Jess's mind. Get back! Tyler shouted again, panic lacing his voice, but it was too late. Jess could feel the ground giving way. She dug her nails into the earth, trying to anchor herself, but the pull was too strong. Claire screamed as she slipped, her body teetering on the brink of the abyss. No! Claire! Jess lunged forward, reaching for her friend. Suddenly, hands cold and skeletal shot up from the dark crevice, grasping at Claire's ankle. Horror-stricken, Claire tried to kick them away, but her shrieks turned to terror, the ragged echoes spiraling into the night. Let go! Let her go! Tyler yelled, his eyes wild, rushing forward to help, but as he dove in, something spewed forth from the abyss, a flurry of shadowy tendrils, reaching and wrapping around him, pulling him toward the gaping maw. Tyler! Jess cried, desperation clawing at her throat. She felt her feet slipping, the ground at her back shifting dangerously. The voice pleaded again, rising abruptly, beckoning, darkness, help me. Tears filled Jess's eyes, her heart racing with no clear choice as everything around them twisted and warped, consuming her friends one by one. In those terrifying moments, she realized the ground wasn't just alive, it was hungry. It craved their despair. With a surge of instinct, she grabbed Claire's arm. We can't save them. We have to go. But even as she said it, something deep within her yearned to know the source of the voice fighting against everything that screamed to pull her into darkness. Jess yanked Claire back, away from the grasping shadows, stumbling away from the tree as it groaned in rage, yet, a fragment of hope flickered. Was it Sam's voice she heard in that darkness? Would he suffer a fate worse than death if they didn't find him? As they broke free from the clearing, the forest closed in around them again, the voices of their friends fading into silence with the angry growl behind them resonating like a death knell. Desperately, they pushed on, hearts racing, leaving behind whispers of friends who might never be found again. But what lay ahead? Would they find their way out of this nightmare? Or were they just on the brink of an even deeper terror? Somewhere deep in the woods, the ground still shook, waiting, watching. The forest loomed around them, shadows twisting under the pale light of the moon. Jess and Claire stumbled through the underbrush, each step laden with dread. The air was thick, almost tangible, making it hard to breathe. They could still hear the distant echoes of their friends' terror, but with every step they took, it felt more like a dream fading into a nightmarish reality. Where do we go now? Claire's voice trembled, panic edging into her tone. She looked over her shoulder, as if the shadows might leap out at them, hungry and eager. Jess clenched her fists, trying to shake the fear winding around her heart. We have to find some kind of shelter. We can't stay out in the open. She fought to keep her thoughts coherent. How could they hope to survive when everything seemed intent on dragging them back into darkness? They rounded a gnarled tree, its branches twisted like skeletal fingers reaching for them. An unsettling chill clawed at their backs. Just ahead lay a narrow path leading deeper into the woods, a path the shadows seemed to beckon them toward. Jess, what if something happens? What if we don't find them? Claire's eyes shone with tears, desperation painted across her features. I can't lose anyone else. We can't think like that. Jess shot back, forcing determination into her voice. We have to keep moving. We can't let a noise cut her off, a heavy thud that echoed through the trees. Jess froze, and Claire's hand clutched her arm instinctively. The sound came again, followed by a deep, rumbling growl. It was close, far too close. No, 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 Claire whispered, her voice breaking as they slowly turned to face the direction the sound came from. From behind a thick cluster of bushes, a hulking figure emerged, a monstrous shape silhouetted by the moonlight. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, massive and distorted, with eyes like smoldering coals glimmering in the dark. Jess's heart raced as it stepped closer, its breath a heavy mist curling in the cool night air. Run! Jess yelled, yanking Claire by the arm as they sprinted down the path, the woods blurring around them. The thud of monstrous feet behind them echoed louder, a relentless pursuit pushing them further into darkness. Where? Where do we go? Claire gasped, her breath sharp and panicked. I don't know. Just keep running. Jess shouted back, adrenaline surging through her veins. they plunged down the narrow path until it split in two. Left or right? Jess hesitated for a split second, then chose right, darting through the dense trees. The thundering footsteps grew fainter, but the terror didn't let up. Jess. Claire's voice was strained with fear. What if we just end up leading it to a dead end? Then we fight. Jess affirmed, though she feared the truth in her own words. The weight of her friend's screams echoed back in her mind, the haunting regret nearly too heavy to bear. Suddenly, as they rounded another bend, the ground beneath them sank away, revealing a narrow crevice, a dark crack in the earth that yawned open like a mouth. They skidded to a halt just before the edge, their bodies pressed against the rocky walls. And that s when they heard it. The voice, a tortured plea swirling around them. Help, me, is that Sam? Claire whispered, the fear in her voice mingling with hope. Or another trap, Jess replied, her instincts warring against her heart. They couldn't risk losing everything by chasing another whisper in the dark. Behind them, the growl rumbled again, closer this time. No. Jess shouted, fear igniting her resolve. We can't go back. With no time left, Jess made a quick decision. We're jumping, she said. They had to take the leap, there was nothing left to lose. Gritting her teeth, Jess grabbed Claire's hand. Together, they leaped into the dark unknown, the shadows swallowing them whole just as the beast erupted from the woods, its monstrous roar echoing behind them. Plunging into the darkness, Jess braced herself for the impact. Little did she know, their flight from the horrors above was just the beginning of a much deeper nightmare. The ground trembled again beneath them, as if eager to reclaim what it had lost. What awaited them in those depths? Would they find salvation or something far more sinister? Falling felt like an eternity. The darkness wrapped around Jess and Claire like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. They cried out, but the sound swallowed in the void. The world seemed to stretch and warp, their minds grasping at the edges of sanity, tumbling helplessly through nothingness until finally, they hit bottom with a bone-jarring thud. Jess gasped, the air knocked from her lungs. Pain shot through her body, and the reality of their situation flooded back as she struggled to breathe. She glanced around, heart pounding. It was dark, disorienting, the air thick with dampness and decay. They were in a cave. Claire. Her voice echoed off the walls, stirring the shadows that clung to every corner. Jess desperately pawed at the ground, feeling for her friend. Claire groaned, blinking against the darkness, her face pale and eyes wide. I'm okay, I think, Claire stammered, but Jess heard the tremor in her voice. Panic bubbling at the surface. We have to move, Jess urged, rising unsteadily to her feet. The creature above must have followed them. They could be trapped, or worse. We can't let it find us here. As they crept deeper into the cave, the silence was heavy and pressing. Each sound they made felt amplified, like an alarm in the stillness. The claustrophobia tightened around them, but Jess couldn't let the fear seep back in. She lifted her phone, its dim light cutting through the shadows, casting quicksilver glimmers on the wrinkled stone. Look, Claire hissed, pointing to a narrow passageway that branched off to their left. Just beyond it, they could hear the sound of water dripping, rhythmic and eerie. Should we? Claire asked, a tremor in her voice. Jess's gut twisted. Something deep in her urged against it, but instinct screamed they had no other options. We have to check it out. If we don't, we might end up lost in here, she said, grasping Claire's wrist. Stay close. They squeezed through the narrow opening, feeling the cool stone against their skin. The light flickered as Jess's phone illuminated strange markings on the wall. Symbols, ancient and worn. The hairs on her neck stood up like whispers left behind by souls long gone. Jess, it's strange, Claire murmured, stepping back. Are we supposed to be here? Before Jess could respond, a rumble echoed through the cave, a sound that churned deep in her stomach. The ground vibrated with the force, and sudden terror clawed at her heart. Go. Jess shoved Claire forward, pushing through the narrow space that opened into a larger chamber ahead. To their horror, the chamber was alive with movement. Shadows danced wildly, illuminated by faint, flickering lights that floated in the air like will-o'-the-wisps. Bodies disfigured, twisted lay scattered around. Some still, some moving, moaning in anguished whispers. It was a graveyard of despair, echoing the cries of lost souls trapped in a perpetual nightmare. Jess! We shouldn't be here. Claire's voice wavered, the grip on her hand tightening as fear coursed through her veins. The lights drew closer, glowing brighter, yet an oppressive darkness lingered at the edges of the room. That's when they heard it again, the voice, more desperate, more familiar. "Help me, Sam." Jess gasped, recognition igniting a spark of hope, but as she turned, a shadow broke from the corner of her eye, curling around the cavern walls, a grotesque figure emerging from the darkness, drawn to them like a moth to flame. "Jess, run!" Claire screamed, but it was too late. The creature lunged, its distorted roar paralyzing them as they froze. Gripped by fear, Jess felt the world spiral away as the shadows enveloped them once more. In that moment of chaos, Jess realized they weren't just hiding from the creature above anymore. Something deeper, more sinister, lurked in the heart of this cave, a truth that could tear them apart if they didn't confront it. As they turned to flee, a force swept over them, stronger than despair, thicker than fear. Would they escape this living nightmare, or would they join the ranks of those lost within? The walls whispered secrets they weren't ready to hear, and Jess wondered, what awaited them in the shadows of their own making. The creature's growl reverberated through the chamber, an eerie sound that felt like ice slicing through Jess's veins. Every instinct screamed for her to run, yet her feet were cemented to the ground, paralyzed by terror. Claire's panicked face was a mirror of Jess's own fear. "Move!" Jess finally yelled, as if the word could somehow break the spell. They dashed toward the exit, hearts racing, adrenaline pumping. The cavern walls pressed in around them, shadows reaching out as though trying to hold them back. Just behind them, the creature snarled, and Jess sensed its hot breath heavy and rancid at her back. "Faster!" she cried, spurred into motion as they skirted around the remnants of fallen bodies. "What is that thing?" Claire gasped, her voice strained, fear palpable in every syllable. "I don't know, but it won't stop until it catches us." Jess shouted back, the weight of their impending doom settling over her like a suffocating blanket. They raced towards the narrow passage they had squeezed through earlier, but it felt like it was getting further away, as if the cave itself shifted in response to their fear. As the shadows writhed wildly behind them, Jess glanced back. The creature was gaining ground. It was massive, twisted limbs, a jagged maw filled with jagged teeth, eyes glinting with an unnatural hunger. Time slowed, every heartbeat highlighting their proximity to doom. "Here!" Jess yanked Claire towards the dim light in the passageway. They dove forward, scraping against the rough stone, gasping as they squeezed through. On the other side, they stumbled into a longer tunnel, the light from Jess's phone barely illuminating the ground beneath their feet. The sounds of dripping water echoed louder now, a maddening reminder of the cave's oppressive presence. But they couldn't stop. They had to keep moving. Past the warnings of their own minds, past the echoes of despair that surrounded them. As they pushed on, Jess's heart hammered, driven not just by fear but by the urge to find a way out, a glimmer of safety in the monstrous dark. "Do you think it followed us?" Claire whispered, breathless, her eyes darting nervously to every crevice and shadow around them. Jess stopped for a moment to catch her breath, the weight of darkness closing in. "I can't," she started, but a sudden crash shook the cavern, snapping her words in half. Dust rained down from the walls as Jess instinctively grabbed Claire's arm. "Run!" The rumbling intensified, the cave groaning as if it were alive, angry. Jess led Claire further into the tunnel, desperately seeking any sign of escape. Their only companions were the chaotic echoes of their footsteps, the ever-present drips of water, and the distant rumble that felt like a warning. Up ahead, they spotted a flicker of brightness more intense, more inviting. Hope surged through Jess, stronger than any fear. "Look!" Claire pointed as they sprinted toward the light. It might be an exit. But as they raced closer, the glow shifted, becoming an angry red hue that painted the tunnel in shades of warning. Claire's voice trembled. Something's wrong. The flickering grew, blinding, accompanied by a cacophony of whispers, a chorus of lamenting souls filling the space around them. The ground trembled again, and Jess stumbled, falling to her knees. "Get up!" Claire cried, but Jess was frozen, staring at the light just beyond their reach. The whispers grew louder, pulling at her mind like a nightmare she couldn't escape. Help us, the voices beckoned, drawing Jess closer, a siren's call. "No!" Claire shouted, pulling on Jess's shirt. "Don't listen." But it was too late. With a sudden rush, Jess felt herself drawn toward the glow, her body betraying her mind. "Jess!" Claire's grip tightened, anchoring her friend to reality. The creature's growl echoed behind them, mixing with the whispers, now sounding like a dark symphony, as if the cave itself was gloating over their plight. Jess's heart raced. She wrestled with the overwhelming urge to succumb to the light, the whispers echoing in her mind. Was it rescue or another trap? As Claire's desperate tugging snapped her back, Jess understood. They had to confront what lay in the shadows instead of succumbing to it. But as she turned to run, the chilling realization struck her: what if the creature wasn't the only thing hunting them here? Their flight continued, the whispers pursuing them relentlessly, leaving Jess to wonder what awaited them in this sinister labyrinth. Could they escape both the darkness and the fate it promised? Would the truth be more dreadful than the monster behind them? Jess's pulse thundered in her ears, reverberating against the cavern walls. As they sprinted deeper, Claire's grip tightened on her arm, leggings fraying against the rocky terrain. The oppressive whispers prickled their skin, mocking their determination, urging them into the gaping maw of despair. "Keep moving," Jess urged, feeling a fierce resolve swell within her. "We'll find a way out. We have to." A low growl rumbled behind them, close and menacing, as if the darkness itself was drawing nearer with every terrified heartbeat. Across the jagged path, the light pulsed like a heartbeat, illuminating the precarious slope ahead. Jess glanced back, seeing only a shadow rippling through the gloom, relentless and powerful. They pushed on, propelled by fear. "Jess! It's coming!" Claire cried, panic threading her voice. "We keep moving," Jess shouted, lunging forward. Then she spotted a jagged opening, faintly glimmering in the distance, just beyond the shadows. Their breaths quickened, a frantic rhythm against the walls closing in around them. But as they scurried toward the flickering light, Jess felt the air shift, thickening with a sense of foreboding. The whispers intensified, swirling like angry spirits, reaching for them as if living. Unearthly and desperate, they screamed in unison, "Help us! Help us! Jess! Listen!" Claire's voice trembled. "We can't trust it." The light morphed, blinding, transforming into a hot crimson haze that stained the dark like spilled blood. "No!" Jess shouted, fighting against its allure. But the urge was magnetic, pulling at her core. "Get back! This way!" Claire yanked at her, forcing her to look away from the blinding lure. Jess felt paralyzed between dread and confusion. "We have to confront whatever it is." But the darkness writhed with anticipation, shadows wriggling eagerly toward them. The cavern trembled anew, rocks cascading from above. The creature was still in pursuit. "Faster!" Jess cried, shoving aside her doubts. They slipped through the jagged opening, emerging into a wider chamber. Here the air felt lighter, yet a heavy odor of stillness and decay lingered. Suddenly, from the shadows ahead, the monstrous creature lunged, its figure lit by an eerie glow. Jess's stomach dropped. It was a twisted manifestation of nightmares, towering menacingly before them. "Run!" Claire screamed, pulling Jess in the opposite direction. They bolted, adrenaline sparking every nerve as they dodged a massive claw that slashed through the air, missed by inches. The cavern echoed with a cacophony of haunting howls and angry rumbles. "Back to the crevice. We can hide!" Jess shouted as Claire nodded, her face pale with sheer fear but determination glinting in her eyes. They dashed towards their only refuge where the walls met, and the cursed shadows couldn't surround them. As they reached the hollow, they took cover, panting heavily. The thundering paws of the creature reverberated through the stone, a relentless heartbeat of terror. They pressed against the wall, holding their breath as darkness encircled them, the echo of their fears becoming tangible. Maybe this place is a trap," Claire whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Are the whispers telling the truth about this place? I don't know, but we can't let it consume us." Jess's voice trembled, yet she fought to keep the resolve within. "We need to move forward. Find a way out." A nervous silence settled around them, and for a moment, hope flickered in Jess's chest. Could they outsmart the shadows? Could they find an exit that wouldn't lead into more nightmares? Suddenly, the growling ceased, replaced by a sickening silence. Claire and Jess exchanged worried looks, hearts racing wildly. "What if it's waiting for us? Just lurking, waiting?" Claire whispered, trembling against the wall. "Then we must be ready," Jess replied, fear coiling in her stomach. "We won't let it take us." Just as she spoke, the shadows shifted, swirling and coiling like a living organism, creeping closer. Jess sensed the desperate yearning of countless lost souls, their chilling whispers wrapping around her. "Help us!" The shadows thickened before her, rising up like an army of the damned. Jess felt a tugging sensation, the urge to listen beating like a drum in her chest. But a spark of something more powerful ignited an anger, a fire pushing her to stand tall against the living nightmare. "No!" she shouted, forcing herself to rise, heart resolute. The words echoed in the chamber, muffled yet firm. "We will not succumb. We will not fall." Claire's eyes widened, bewilderment and admiration flickering there. Together, the two girls faced the shadows. "Defy it," Jess urged, squeezing Claire's hand tightly. With the dim light of Jess's phone illuminating the ground ahead, they charged forward, renewed determination propelling them as they pierced through the oppressive veil of darkness. They ran, hearts blazing in sync, into the furious unknown, and in that moment, they knew fear could be faced. They would confront the monster, the whispers, and the blinding light. Together, with every step fueled by a flame brighter than the darkness around them, they rose from fear to fight the oppressive shadows, heading for salvation. Finally, as they pressed onward, the creature roared, a howl of rage that surged through the air, and the very walls rocked as if the cavern itself were imploding. But Jess wouldn't let fear take the lead. Amid the clamor, Jess rallied her thoughts. "We can't hold back now. This is our moment to reclaim what's ours." With one last push, they ventured deeper into the chamber, the echoes reverberating with triumph. The shadows surged behind them, howling in spiteful fury. They had soaked in their pain, their lost souls, but they would not share their fate. They were alive, fleshed out, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. As they dashed toward the spiraling exit bathed in stark light, their hearts thundered, alive with hope and fear, knowing they had chosen their destiny. "We'll get through this," Jess whispered, squeezing Claire's hands as the shadows recoiled. "Together." And with that shared promise, they plunged forward into the light, leaving behind a storm of darkness yet carrying a flame of innocence unbroken and fiercely determined to escape the horrors of the wilderness and return to the shelter of the dawn. They pushed through the darkness, and just as they found freedom, Jess turned once more to the shadows. "We will remember you, all of you." Her voice rang true. "But we are alive, and we will tell our story." The shadows fell silent, as if their cries had been acknowledged. They broke free into the morning light, a new dawn glimmering at the horizon. As sunlight streamed through the trees, they collapsed in relief, holding on to the reality that life still awaited them beyond the woods. Yet, amid their triumph lay a lingering truth: there would always be whispers in the dark, vestiges of their encounter that beckon and reconnect the threads of fear. Yet now, they were stronger, bound by courage among the shadows. They would carry the scars but also the strength, the memories of lost ones and the hope of survival, forever connected by a shared journey against the mountain horrors. As they took the first steps away from the darkness, a new story began, enveloped in warmth and the light of day, a story that would be written by those who dared to defy the nightmares and embrace what waited to be remembered. Don't wait even one more second. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss out on the next exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button right now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. We want to hear from you. And remember, this is the moment to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion. Your support makes all the difference.